Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going back in time today,
Way back.
back to ancient India.
Around 300 BC.
Yeah, the Mauryan Empire. It's a whole different world. Emperors, huge cities,
Totally different society from ours.
and we have the coolest guide,
Who is that?
a Greek ambassador named Megasthenes.
Oh, wow. He actually lived there.
He did. It's like having a time traveler's journal.
With first-hand observations.
I know. Like a travel blog from 2,300 years ago.
That's amazing.
But there's a catch.
Uh-oh. What's that?
Megasthenes wrote a book called Indica.
Okay.
Only problem is, the full text is lost.
Oh, no.
All we have are like fragments and quotes.
From other writers and historians?
So it's a puzzle with missing pieces.
But even those pieces are so interesting.
They really are. Okay, so first the big picture.
Okay.
Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the empire.
Right.
This source has details about his palace life.
Oh, tell me.
He only held court 4 days a week.
Really?
That's some power move.
It's intriguing. And that's not all. Chandragupta had spies.
Spies.
Disguised as holy men to watch everything in his court.
Wow. The level of intrigue.
It makes you wonder what was going on.
I know. Why so much intel? Was it just power or other threats too?
That's a great question. It shows how power worked. In the Mauryan Empire,
Yeah.
Chandragupta ruled a huge and diverse area.
Keeping control must have been tough.
It took a whole network of informants.
Makes sense. With an empire that big, you can't be everywhere.
Definitely not.
Okay, now get this. The Mauryan army.
Okay.
Megasthenes says Chandragupta had 600,000 infantry,
Wow.
30,000 cavalry,
Okay.
and 9,000 war elephants.
9,000 elephants.
Can you imagine them marching?
What a show of force.
Right. It must have been mind-boggling.
Totally. Just feeding an army that size.
You have the logistics?
The Mauryan Empire wasn't just big.
Right.
It was a military powerhouse with a structured organization.
It wasn't just about numbers.
There was strategy, too.
Absolutely. And the source tells us
It tells us what?
about the army's organization.
Oh, okay.
It had 6 divisions: infantry, cavalry, chariots,
Wow.
elephants, navy, and transport.
Compared to other armies back then, that's sophisticated.
6 divisions. It's like a modern military.
Almost.
So you've got a powerful king,
Yep.
a vast empire,
Yeah.
and a huge army.
Right.
But where was the heart of all
That's
this?
the question. Where was it?
Pataliputra, the capital city.
Okay.
Megasthenes visited it,
He did.
and his description sounds like fantasy.
Oh, wow.
A giant wooden wall around the city, a moat so wide
Wow.
it needed speckled boats to cross, and a palace so beautiful.
It was breathtaking.
It sounds incredible.
Pataliputra really showed Mauryan power.
It does. And wealth. Grand cities that size were rare then.
Especially back then.
Megasthenes came from Greece.
Right.
It must have been an amazing sight for him.
I can only imagine.
It's like someone from a small village,
Okay.
suddenly in New York City for the first time.
I get it. Sensory overload.
Exactly. And Pataliputra wasn't just buildings.
Oh, what else?
It was a center for trade and administration.
The heart of the empire.
Makes sense. Managing an empire that size, you need infrastructure.
You need a way to make it work.
Right. So let's talk about how things worked.
Okay. How did it work?
Megasthenes describes this complex system.
Oh, wow.
A council advising the king, committees for different things, officials for various tasks.
It sounds pretty centralized.
It was, which again makes sense.
Such a huge, diverse area.
Yep. And one thing that stands out
What's that?
is their focus on trade and infrastructure,
Those are key.
crucial for connecting the empire and the economy.
They understood that a well-connected empire
Right.
is a strong empire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But okay, emperors, armies, all that.
What about the people?
Yeah, what about the people living there?
Right.
Well, according to Megasthenes,
Wait, what did he say?
Mauryan society had 7 social classes,
7 classes.
each with a specific role. You had philosophers,
Yeah.
spies,
Okay.
soldiers, farmers, hunters, merchants, artisans.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's like a well-organized anthill.
That structure wasn't random, was it?
Nope. It showed the empire's values.
Making sure everyone contributed.
Exactly. And it's interesting.
What's that?
Megasthenes says philosophers were high up
Really?
in Mauryan society. That says something
About what?
about how they valued knowledge and wisdom.
That's cool.
It is. Like saying brains matter as much as brawn.
Right.
So we've got this structured society. Everyone has a job.
Okay.
But what about the details of their lives?
What was it like to live there?
Right, what was it actually like?
To be a Mauryan citizen.
Well, this is where it gets interesting.
How so?
Megasthenes describes daily life, and it might surprise you.
Okay, tell me more.
He says they lived pretty simple lives, big focus on religion,
Uh-huh.
and get this, he says there wasn't much slavery.
Hold on, no slavery.
Not widespread, at least,
Yeah.
which is unusual for ancient times.
That's a huge difference.
I know. Think about other empires then.
Where slavery was everywhere.
It was a major part of their economy.
This really sets the Mauryan Empire apart.
It does. It makes you wonder, how do they manage without it?
It raises questions about their society.
And their economy.
What made it work?
Historians are still trying to figure that out.
That's what's great about history.
I know. Always more to learn.
There are always more questions. Okay, but now for the part.
Which part?
That makes me wonder if Megasthenes was exaggerating.
What do you mean?
He talks about some pretty wild stuff.
Like what?
People with one eye in their foreheads.
Oh, come on.
And others with ears so big they could sleep in them.
Was he serious?
I have to wonder.
Well, we have to be careful with these stories.
You think he was just trying to make things interesting?
Maybe he was writing for a Greek audience?
Right?
Maybe he wanted to play up the exotic side of India?
To make his book more exciting.
Exactly. Or maybe he heard these stories.
And got them mixed up.
It's possible. So we have this amazing account, but it's a mix of facts and storytelling.
It is.
The big question is, how accurate was Megasthenes? What can we learn from him?
That's what we need to figure out. It is a puzzle. We need to look at other sources and think about why he said certain things.
Yeah, like, was he trying to impress his Greek readers? Or was he being factual?
Exactly. But before we go full detective, there's someone we can't forget.
Who's that?
Emperor Ashoka. He's legendary.
Yeah, the one who went from conquering to embracing Buddhism and peace. That's a big change.
It's a remarkable story. Ashoka is key to understanding the Mauryan Empire.
He really changed things.
He did. After all that expansion through military power, he had a change of heart. Because Buddhism.
So he went from war to peace.
Exactly. And it made a difference. He wasn't just a Buddhist, he promoted it. And his famous edicts, you know, the ones carved on pillars and rocks.
The edicts on rocks.
Yeah.
Like ancient billboards.
More than billboards. They were pronouncements, meant to be seen and followed. And they talked about so many things: social welfare, animal rights, even religious tolerance and ethics.
So he wasn't just focused on Buddhism. He wanted a better society.
It seems that way. Ashoka's edicts show leadership beyond power. He wanted people to live good lives, respect elders, nonviolence, compassion.
Those are still important values today. It's like he was ahead of his time. Did his ideas really change how people lived, though?
That's a tough one to answer. But we can say for sure Ashoka's embrace of Buddhism and peace, it had a lasting impact on Indian culture and thought. His edicts were a model for later rulers, and they inspired people for generations.
Artists, writers, thinkers.
All of them.
So even though the Mauryan Empire ended,
His ideas continued.
they did for centuries. That's a real legacy. But zooming out a bit,
Okay.
Megasthenes wasn't the only one writing about India then. Other Greek and Roman writers mention the Mauryan Empire too.
That's right. Often describing it as this land of wealth and exotic wonders.
I have to ask, what exotic wonders? Were they real?
Well, some exaggeration, sure. But they were describing things unique to India. Spices, gems, silks, animals you wouldn't find in Europe. The Mauryan Empire had tons of natural resources and vast trade networks by land and sea.
So they were a big deal in the ancient economy.
They were a hub for trade between East and West. Merchants came from everywhere, exchanging goods, ideas. It was a cosmopolitan empire.
It makes you wonder what those merchants would think of today's world.
I know.
But back then, how did the Mauryans see themselves? Did they feel powerful?
Hard to know what they were thinking. But from Ashoka and other sources,
Okay.
it seems they saw themselves as a force for good. Powerful but benevolent, wanting to spread their values.
It sounds like they knew they were important.
They did. Okay, so we've talked about emperors, armies, cities, big ideas.
Trade too.
But what about everyday people?
What was it like to be a farmer? An artisan?
Or a merchant?
Megasthenes talks about that some, right?
He does, and while he might have exaggerated some cultural stuff, right.
His descriptions of daily life are useful. He says they lived pretty simply. Agriculture was everything.
Not everyone lived in palaces then.
Exactly. Most people were farmers, artisans, traders, laborers.
Simple lives.
He describes their clothes as simple, cotton mostly, and vegetarian diets.
Rice, lentils, vegetables.
Sounds familiar.
It does. Still staples in India today.
What about beliefs and customs?
He mentions Hinduism was dominant. Buddhism was growing, though, especially after Ashoka. He also noticed a belief in reincarnation and karma, and all sorts of rituals and ceremonies.
It's amazing how some things continue through time.
They really do.
But there's that detail about no slavery. That's huge compared to other societies. It makes you think.
It does. Historians are still debating it. Some think Megasthenes was wrong, or his account wasn't complete. Others say maybe the Mauryan Empire had a different labor system, not so reliant on slavery.
So maybe they organized work differently, or their types of servitude weren't what Greeks considered slavery.
It's a mystery.
It is, one that needs more figuring out.
That's what I love about history. Always more to explore.
There is so many layers. The Mauryan Empire is fascinating.
It really is, with all its ups and downs and complexities.
We've gone from palaces and armies to daily life and philosophy. It's been a whirlwind. But before we finish up on the Mauryan Empire, there's this one question I keep thinking about. What if Megasthenes could see India today?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. It really gets to the heart of why we do history. It's not just dates and names. It's about how things change, how the past shapes the present.
Totally. So put yourself in his shoes for a second.
Okay.
What would blow his mind about India today?
I think, first off, just landing in a city like Mumbai or Delhi, the scale of it, the skyscrapers, all the people.
It would be overwhelming.
Completely. He'd have a hard time believing it was the same country.
I bet.
And it's not just the size. Think about the diversity, all the languages, religions, cultures. Remember, he was writing about a specific time. India's gone through so much since then.
It makes you wonder if he'd even recognize it.
I know, right?
What about the role of women? We talked about how limited things were back then, mostly domestic stuff.
Yeah, Megasthenes doesn't say much about women, but from other sources, it seems they didn't have the same chances as men.
So if he could see women today, leaders, running businesses, involved in politics,
Driving change.
you'd be shocked.
Totally.
It's amazing how much has changed. But there's still work to do.
Definitely.
Okay, but I gotta ask, what about technology? Can you imagine showing him a smartphone?
Or explaining the internet.
Instant communication, all that information.
It would seem like magic. Forget about trying to explain AI or space travel.
It really makes you think. We take so much for granted these days.
We do.
But it also makes you wonder, what from ancient India would still resonate today?
Ooh, good question. What connects that time to now? I think, for one, those values Ashoka talked about, tolerance, nonviolence, respecting nature, those are still so relevant today, especially with all the conflict and climate change.
They do seem more important than ever.
They are. And beyond those specifics, I think that emphasis on spirituality, that search for meaning, that's still powerful in India and around the world, really.
It is. So as we wrap up our look at the Mauryan Empire, I'm just struck by everything they accomplished. And it makes me appreciate India's legacy even more, a place that's always changing and evolving.
I agree. And as we've seen through Megasthenes, history is more than just facts. It's stories, viewpoints. It's about trying to understand our place in the world.
It's like looking back and seeing ourselves reflected in ways we didn't expect.
I like that.
And maybe that's what we should take away from this deep dive. We face so many challenges now. But maybe by looking at the past, at what worked, what didn't, we can find some guidance for a better future.
Beautifully said. Learning from those who came before us. That's a powerful idea.
It is.